Historically, madrasas were often small, locally run institutions led by individual scholars. However, under his leadership, the madrasa system was standardized and expanded. Many historians argue that he was among the pioneers in establishing the framework for modern universities, introducing structured curriculums and formalized study under multiple scholars. One of his key innovations was the financial support provided to students. Unlike previous madrasas, which were typically funded by local rulers or governors, the madrasas established by the vizier were supported by the wealth of the state. This allowed for larger institutions, better facilities, and the provision of stipends to students. Such stipends also implied that students had to meet certain qualifications to enroll, ensuring that the educational standards remained high. Furthermore, these madrasas employed not just one instructor but a faculty of scholars, each specializing in different fields. Before this time, students seeking knowledge would have to travel extensively, studying under various scholars in different locations. His system brought all of these experts to one location, providing students with a comprehensive education in a single institution. This model not only centralized education but also set the foundation for similar institutions to be built across several major cities in Seljuk territories. The first of these institutions was established in Nishapur in 1059 CE, with the esteemed scholar Imam al-Juwayni appointed as its head. Al-Juwayni, who had previously been exiled due to political tensions, was recalled to lead the new madrasa, receiving full financial support and the freedom to teach as he saw fit. Additionally, he was made the Imam of the Grand Mosque of Nishapur, further solidifying his influence. At this point, the governor was not yet the Grand Vizier, but when he later assumed that position, he expanded the madrasa system throughout the empire, using state funds to finance the construction of similar institutions. His reforms laid the groundwork for a network of madrasas that would shape Islamic education for generations. Baghdad witnessed a significant turning point in Islamic education with the establishment of a new institution shortly after the overthrow of the Buyids in 1065 CE. Construction began either 1 or 2 years after this event, and by 1067 CE, the inauguration of what would be considered the first proto-university in the Sunni Arab world took place. While other educational institutions existed, none matched the scale, structure, or influence of this establishment. Though there had been smaller schools with similar programs, none reached the grandeur and scope of this institution. This educational center, located in Baghdad, can be compared to earlier proto-universities such as those in Nishapur, Iran. However, it surpassed them in size, number of students, and influence. Within 5 to 7 years of its founding, numerous other schools were established, with estimates ranging from 9 to 11. Additionally, a unique custom was introduced. Students received stipends to finance their studies, and professors were well compensated. This system was unprecedented in Islamic education, as students in smaller madrasas typically did not receive financial support, and teachers often worked for minimal salaries. Prior to this development, many students faced financial hardships and struggled to sustain themselves while pursuing education. The establishment of state-supported madrasas revolutionized the educational landscape, providing students with security and future opportunities. Those who excelled could become professors or secure other prominent roles across the Islamic world. These institutions became comparable to the Ivy League universities in the modern era, serving as the most prestigious centers of learning. As a result, the entire field of scholarship was elevated, particularly in theology, as the schools advanced their reach into regions previously untouched by such scholarship. The aim was to channel the intellectual and spiritual power of these institutions, with their leaders personally overseeing the selection of professors and maintaining authority over the curriculum. Historical records suggest that this project was driven more by the personal ambitions of its founders rather than by any direct involvement of the ruling sultans. The establishment of such an institution in Baghdad, the heart of the Islamic world, was an achievement in itself. However, the construction and operation of the school were not sufficient to ensure the spread of theological ideas. A struggle for influence ensued, marked by several incidents. The inauguration of the institution took place in 1067 CE, with prominent figures of the time in attendance. Although the intended head of the institution was unable to attend due to unclear circumstances, his absence led to a power shift. A wealthy businessman with considerable influence, Abu Said Mu'adab, assumed the role of dean of the school. This internal coup caused great discontent, and the original nominee, who had strong support, reacted with fury, penalizing those involved in this decision. 20 days after assuming his position, Abu Said was removed, and the intended leader, Abu Ishaq, was installed as the head of the institution. The appointment was solidified through formal means, and historical records preserve his letters expressing his anger and dissatisfaction with the earlier developments. This incident is a testament to the political and social dynamics surrounding the establishment of this significant educational institution, which would go on to shape Islamic scholarship in the centuries that followed. The establishment of this college was a strategic move, designed with a clear purpose, to ensure that specific scholars would hold prominent positions within the institution. The key individual at the center of this plan was al-Juwayni, a well-known Ash'ari scholar. When another figure, who was not aligned with Ash'arism, was initially appointed to a senior position, it led to significant unrest. The founder of the college, determined to see his vision realized, quickly intervened, dismissing the appointed individual and installing al-Juwayni. This event reveals the founder's personal involvement in shaping the intellectual direction of the institution. This incident is just one example of the broader sectarian dynamics of the time. Historical records indicate that the founder's goal was not merely to create an impressive educational facility but to place scholars from his favored school of thought in positions of authority. His actions reflect the prevailing sectarian mindset of the era, where religious factions vied for influence. It is clear that the founder was intent on promoting Ash'arism, a theological school to which he was deeply committed. Al-Juwayni himself authored a work titled Allusion to the People of the Truth, in which he openly expressed his adherence to Ash'ari theology. This made him an ideal candidate for the professorial chair of the new institution. Another key point to note is the designation of the college itself. The institution bore a plaque that identified it simply as the college, underscoring its status as a premier center of learning, independent of any specific legal or theological school. However, it became evident that the college was primarily focused on propagating a particular interpretation of Islam. Other schools of thought, such as the Hanbalis, were sidelined in favor of the Ash'ari approach. This ideological shift did not go unnoticed, especially among the Hanbalis, who expressed dissatisfaction with the growing influence of Ash'arism in Baghdad. Tensions between the two groups eventually escalated into open conflict. This marked the beginning of a permanent divide between the Hanbalis and Ash'aris, a division that continues to this day. This event, known as the Fitna of the Mirab, signified the first major public split between these two theological schools. Prior to this point, while there had been disagreements between the Hanbalis and Ash'aris, these disputes had not led to outright hostility. However, the Fitna introduced a clear demarcation between the two factions, leading to a sustained period of rivalry and theological discord. The term, Fitna, itself refers to the trial or civil strife that began when an outspoken Ash'ari cleric was chosen to preach to the public, provoking opposition from the Hanbalis. This conflict arose after a decade of Ash'ari teachings within the walls of the college. By then, there was sufficient public support to open a professorial chair in one of Baghdad's main mosques. This marked a significant turning point, as it was the first time Ash'ari theology was taught publicly in a formal setting. Until then, Ash'ari scholars had only engaged in private teaching sessions with limited influence. The establishment of a madrasa dedicated to Ash'ari thought was unprecedented, signaling the growing power and reach of this theological movement within the Islamic world. For the first time, a significant academic chair was co-opted by a new school of thought. For nearly 200 years, these chairs had been exclusively occupied by scholars aligned with the earlier theological schools. However, this time, the prestigious professorial chair in one of the major mosques was given to an Ash'ari scholar. The chosen individual was the renowned al-Qushayri, who died in 1120 CE. Al-Qushayri was the grandson of the famous Sufi scholar Abu al-Qasim al-Qushayri, known for his influential works. The young al-Qushayri studied under prominent figures like Ibn Furik and Imam al-Juwayni, making him a notable Ash'ari theologian. Though only in his early 30s, he was a fiery and zealous preacher, known for his uncompromising views. Al-Qushayri was sent to Baghdad in 1076 CE with the political support of the ruling authorities, who appointed him to the chair. Upon his arrival, he began preaching Ash'ari theology in a provocative manner, openly criticizing other schools of thought, particularly the Hanbalists. News of his harsh rhetoric spread quickly throughout the city, where his sermons were perceived as disrespectful toward other theological traditions. Among the Hanbalists, the prominent scholar Abu Ja'far, an elderly cleric and a highly respected figure, became incensed by al-Qushayri's public denunciations. Abu Ja'far, regarded as a modern-day inheritor of the legacy of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rallied the Hanbali community against al-Qushayri's presence. His students and supporters were similarly outraged, and tensions began to rise in the city. Sensing the growing unrest, the rector of the institution where al-Qushayri taught wrote to the ruling authorities, pleading for intervention. He warned that al-Qushayri's inflammatory sermons were inciting public disorder and that the situation could escalate into violence. Despite these warnings, the tensions reached a breaking point. According to several historical sources, students from both factions, Ash'aris and Hanbalis, began clashing in the streets. The violence erupted when Hanbali students, angered by al-Qushayri's public criticisms, confronted his followers outside the mosque. A brawl ensued, with students on both sides hurling stones and bricks at one another. The fighting quickly spread to the marketplace, with bystanders caught in the melee. Tragically, an innocent bystander was killed during the chaos, and many shops were damaged as the violence spiraled out of control. The Hanbalis, being larger in number due to their dominance in the city, eventually drove the Ash'ari students back to their quarters. The Ash'ari students retreated to the madrasa, where they barricaded themselves. However, the Hanbali students, led by the enraged followers of Abu Ja'far, continued to stir up further unrest. This conflict, rooted in theological differences, marked a turning point in Islamic history. It was the first time that physical violence broke out between scholars and students over doctrinal disagreements, a phenomenon previously limited to intellectual debates. This event foreshadowed the sectarian conflicts that would continue to divide the Muslim community for centuries, with its origins in the violent clashes of 469 Hijri in Baghdad. The non-master students, not the leaders of the institution, surrounded the madrasa. Remarkably, the madrasa was effectively under siege. The students opposing the Ash'ari scholars, referring to themselves as Hanbalis, though historically they did not call themselves this, besieged the school. Inside, the students had barricaded themselves, treating the madrasa as a fortress. In a mockery of the caliphate, these students began calling out to the Fatimid caliph in Egypt, appealing for help against what they perceived as their oppressors. Ironically, the Abbasid Caliphate was physically close by in Baghdad, just a mile or two from the scene. This appeal to the Fatimids was intended to mock the Abbasid authorities, as the caliph himself did not side with the Ash'ari students.